Hi guys, today I want to talk to you about an area where a lot of salespeople and frankly a lot of founders really struggle, and that is around running effective sales meetings. Now listen, the cold hard truth about sales meetings is that prospects, despite what you might think, they love to waste your time. They'll often invite you into a meeting, they'll ask you lots of questions. I mean, how many times have you been in a meeting where the prospect's making all the right noises, they're nodding their head, they're asking really good questions, and you're thinking, this is going really, really great, this is going so well. And then you come to that awkward moment towards the end of the meeting where you're asking for their commitment, and then suddenly they start coming up with all kinds of excuses like, yeah, well, I need to check this with somebody internally. We need to do something, there's another process we need to follow. And it will go against everything they've told you previously, that they're the decision maker, that they're empowered to make the decision. And it comes down to the fact that we're all trained from an early age to lie to salespeople. Okay, so remember when you were younger and you hear I'm old enough to remember landlines. So you hear the phone ringing, and then dad would get up and answer the phone. And then they'd ask, is your mum in? And he'd come back and say, no, she's not there. And you go, well, what's that all about? Mum's here. But obviously he knew it was a sales call, so he told them no. So from an early age, we're indoctrinated into this mindset of it's okay to lie to salespeople. And once you get your head around this, it's going to make your life a lot easier. As I said, no, I've got huge experience of this. I'm sure you do too, where you go into a meeting and you're thinking, God, it's great. And they say, the worst thing is they'll say is, can you send me a proposal? And you fall into this trap of not only giving them free information because they're picking your brain with lots of questions in the sales meeting. The final kick in the teeth is they ask you then to document everything you've told them in the meeting in a proposal. And how many of you can relate to this? You send a proposal to them. After a few days, you think, I'm not going to follow up straight away. Maybe I'll wait a day or two. You send an email or call them, and they say, sorry, I haven't really had time to look at your proposal. And then so you leave it. You say, okay, that's fine. Maybe leave it another day or two. And then you start turning into this despicable, almost kind of begging person. I'm just checking in. Did you have a chance to look at the proposal yet? What do you think? And you end up wasting a ton of time and frankly energy chasing up something that was really never destined to close as a new deal, because as I said, prospects lie to you all of the time. So what I want you to do in the format that this new format about running sales meetings, what I want you to do is change your mindset about it. So it's much more a meeting of equals when you go into a sales meeting. I don't want you to be this needy founder slash salesperson who's really chasing something that's not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to give you some real it's impossible to give you a full script because all of your solutions are different. Everyone has a slightly different solution, but I'm going to give you an outline of how to approach this, what it looks like actually in practice in a meeting. Now, another area or another reason why founders and salespeople struggle around meetings is they're not really clear about what their buying process looks like. And again, that will be different depending on what you're selling or your specific solution. So how can you expect to take control of the meeting if you don't know what your buying journey looks like? Your job is not to let the prospect tell you how they're going to deal with buying your product. It's to basically educate them and take them through the steps. So what I'm saying here is when you go into the first meeting, you need to be super clear about what you want to get out of that specific meeting. What does the next step look like? Because frankly, it's a binary choice. They either move to your next step, commit to moving to what that next step is, or it's a clear no. I want you to avoid this no man's land of, we're going to think about it. Maybe I need to check, because this is so toxic. I have years of experience of this. A lot of the founders that I've worked with also do, where you end up in this kind of power dynamic, as I've said, where you're chasing all the time. and they're taking away your power, and it just turns you frankly into a loser. So I can't say there's more, I can't say there's enough. You need to get to, yep, we're moving to the next step, whether that's the demo, whether it's to sign the contract, or it's a no. So it's got to be either or, this kind of in-between ground. That is not an option for you. So another area where founders really, and salespeople as well, they really kind of trip over is the whole point of the first sales meeting. And I see this all the time with founders, is they'll go to the first meeting and they'll rush straight into doing the demo. They've built this wonderful solution and they want to show it off. So what they'll do is they'll launch straight into a demo typically, and they'll do, it's not even a demo, it's what I call a product walkthrough, where they're showing every single piece of functionality. And it's wrong for so many reasons, including the fact that they haven't asked one single question. The point of the first meeting, above anything else, is to get your customer, your prospect, to talk and to elicit an emotional response for them. It's not to show what you do, it's to really get them on an emotional journey to realize they have a big problem that they need to solve, and then you can position what you do as the solution to that specific problem. So you've got to think, am I leading the meeting or am I letting the prospect lead me? So how does this look in practice? I've got a couple of slides here that we can run through. So when you're setting, it's really important that you set up the first meeting with a really clear intent. Okay, so you can start with, thank you for having me. Check that you have the full time. There's nothing worse than running over time and then you get cut off mid-flow. You need to make sure that you have the full hour or the full 30 minutes, whatever it is. And then start by, explaining how this is going to look. Remember, it's your meeting. You are in control. So you can say something like, listen, before we start, I want to agree a couple of things with you. I wrote this from the perspective of a post-trade automation solution. So you say, look, some firms struggle with implementing our solution and others might not really see us as the right fit. Can you tell me no today if you feel that way too? If you feel that we're not a solution for you, are you comfortable telling me no today? And then go on to say, look, I'm going to ask a lot of tough questions here to see if we are a right fit, to see if our solution will align with your needs. Is it okay if I ask these type of questions, if I challenge you? And then what I want you to do, what I was referring to earlier, I want to make this much more an equal power play. So it's very tempting to go into meetings with this kind of, oh, I'm desperate for the money, oh, I really need the business. You need to go in with the mindset of, I have a really valuable solution here that can help you, and I get to choose who I work with. So you've got to set it up as a mutual decision-making process. So once you get them to commit to being comfortable to tell you no, you say, all right, okay, well, if I feel our platform isn't the right fit for you, would you be upset if I also told you no today? And that's really important because you're setting this up as an equal kind of power play, all right? Key here, and this goes back to what I was just saying, we want to get to one of two outcomes: a real clear no, or yes, let's move to the next step, whatever that looks like in your world. So you say something along the lines of, if we don't say no, okay, to each other today, we'll take a few minutes at the end to agree on how to move forward. Okay, does that sound fair? So once you've got all that out of the way, in the open, you then go to start the meeting. And there's a kind of a little bit of, I guess, theatrics here. It's kind of acting. You go to ask your first question. So you've already got them to agree that you're going to ask lots of maybe uncomfortable questions, in-depth questions. Before I ask my first question, I just realized something really important. I only actually have one next step in mind in my world. Shall I share you right now what that is? And they're going to say, oh yeah, of course, like tell me what it is. And again, you need to think about what the next step looks like after the first meeting in your world. For some of you, it might be to schedule the demo. It might be, depending on what your sales cycle looks like, it might be to send over the contract. It might be to schedule a follow-up meeting to include additional stakeholders. But you've got to be really clear on that, because you, as I've said, are managing the buying journey here. So offer the next step. Say, look, I don't expect you to commit to a full-scale implementation without testing our capabilities. We start with a trial so you can test our functionality. Does that sound fair? And they're going to say to you, yeah, that sounds reasonable. And then you can charge for that. Okay, this sounds, for a lot of you, you're going to be panicked when I say this. The reason why I recommend charging for a trial is because it shows you're testing their intent, whether they're really serious about your solution. And I don't care what it is, whatever amount you propose for that, but it's important that you charge something, because it really tests their commitment. So you could say, look, okay, all right, we charge X amount for a 1-month trial. Is that okay with you? And often they'll say, yep, that's fine. And if they start to push back, you can start to ask the question, well, why do you think we charge for trials and some other vendors don't? And you can start saying things like, well, actually, you want them to come up with the response, but they should be coming up with things like, well, I guess you invest a lot of time and effort into making sure the trial is a success. That's where you want to get them to. So the idea is ask them those questions to really get to the conclusion that you want them to get to. And a fundamental change here, this really works, is to get their objection. Often, in a bog standard sales meeting, often what happens is you go through your whole spiel, you do the demo, you talk to them, and then they start throwing out objections at the end. And often these are kind of excuses. What I encourage you to do, it's much more effective, is to get these objections out of the way at the front of the meeting. So offer them up. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but before you start, your questioning and showing what you do, just say to them, look, do you mind if I tell you the 3 reasons firms decide not to work with us? And you could, whatever those are in your world, maybe it's a price concern. We're a premium solution. Full implementation can be in the range of X and Y per year. Okay. It's a time investment. So integration takes commitment from your team. It takes effort. Have you considered the internal resources needed? It could be resistance to change. Okay, so a lot of firms, they don't like change. They perceive that as being risky. They don't want to move away from their legacy systems. Even if we provide efficiency gains, would that still be a barrier? And if they start pushing back and saying, well, actually, that could be a problem. Challenge them. Why are we here? Why are we sitting around this table? I'm coming here with a solution, but actually, if you're not going to change anyway, because you're worried about, moving away from legacy systems, what's the point of continuing the conversation? And I know this sounds harsh. I know this sounds very direct, but it's much better to stop the meeting here, because it shows you're credible, than wasting your time, talking to them for another 40 minutes when they're frankly not going to move forward. So the idea here is to get the common objections out in the open, and then you can talk about them, address them, and actually discontinue the meeting if it's much better to get your price out in the open rather than tiptoeing around it at the end of the meeting. If it's really out of their ballpark, well, walk away. Stop wasting your time. And then when you get into the main body of the meeting, it's all about asking questions. So you start off by saying something really kind of open-ended. Okay, look, tell me, why am I here today? What motivated you to take the meeting? Again, you want to get them to do most of the talking here. It's not about you showing off your knowledge, how much you know this specific domain, how much you know your solution. It's about eliciting an emotional response and getting them to think about what will happen in their world if they carry on doing things the same way that they've been doing them so far. You could look. I can't give you an exhaustive list here, but this is from the perspective of a post-trade solution, right, for brokers. So let's pretend we work together. Think about 12 months ahead. What would it need to take for you to say that adopting our solution was the best decision? This is really a good question to ask, because you get to the heart of what they're trying to achieve, and they'll start talking about their existing processes, their pain points, what pisses them off, what causes them that pain. Remember, it's about emotion. What inefficiencies in your post-trade processes need to be addressed for this investment to be worthwhile. Again, you're uncovering what really is their motivator, what are their buying criteria. All of this is key for when you start showing your solution, because you need to give them not a product walkthrough, but a real specific demo of those features that address their specific pain points. I don't want to label all of these, but you get the idea. So questioning, thinking about what questions are really relevant to your target audience's world, get those down, and you need to be prepared to ask them. And again, the whole area around disqualification. So if they start coming up with excuses or indicating that the way they're currently doing things is, it's all right, we don't really want to change. Again, you've got to challenge them, okay? So ask the question, do you think these inefficiencies are acceptable? Is the way you're currently doing business okay to you? And if they say yes, well, excuse me, why are we having this conversation? Okay? You can almost threaten to leave the room. I know this sounds uncomfortable to a lot of you, but you're showing by doing this that you're credible and you know what you're all about. You know your solution. You know their world. Okay, they're going to be sitting up and listening to you because they know you're not the typical kind of bowl in hand kind of begging approach to meetings, which so many salespeople and founders adopt. You've got to ask those tough questions. You've got to get them to squirm a bit. So how long has this problem been going on for? Jesus, have you thought about the operational risk here of the way you're doing things manually, maybe with an Excel spreadsheet or, some really ad hoc procedure that you currently operate? What is the cost? Okay, in this world of post-trade solutions, what is the cost of errors in your data and delays? What does that mean? Ask questions where they have to drill down into what that means, the knock-on effects. So for example, if they've got lots of errors in their report and they give that to a client, the client gets really annoyed. That's going to damage their reputation, potentially long-term. That's going to affect their business because that specific customer cancels. You've got to get them to really, really think about what the knock-on effects will be if they don't address these particular problems. And then ask them also, look, we're all businesses. We're driven by profit. Profit is a function of your revenue and your costs. So ask the question how much is this costing your business? If you're not doing things right the first time round, what does that mean for your costs? These inefficiencies are costing you, time and hard currency, okay? Get them to try and put a figure on it, because then by doing that, and you come to the conversation about what your solution costs, what that investment will be. If you're helping them to save, let's say, £1 million a year, and your solution is 100,000, that's a really great return on investment, okay? Because you're getting rid of all of those inefficiencies and costs. Okay, talked enough about that. What you also need to do in the first meeting, and this sounds maybe counterintuitive, but you need to get them to think about, from their standpoint, what are the alternatives? Okay, what other solutions could they use? And they might not necessarily be competitors. They might not be other vendors. It could be maybe they carry on doing things as they currently are. Maybe they do an internal build, okay? And the idea here is you go through the alternatives and you help them understand through your questioning, what does that mean? What the pros and cons are, okay? You could say, why don't you just continue with your manual processes? Oh, right, yeah. So me as a customer thinking, well, you know what? It's really not optimal. I'm having problems there. We have a lot of mistakes. We need to change. What about an internal build? Well, you know what? We don't really have capacity. We're overstretched as it is with our resources, and it's going to cost a lot, right? Because we're going to have to start from scratch. We've got to do all of the spec of the solution. We've got to build it. We don't really have expertise in that area. Through your questioning, you want them to discount those other alternatives and get round to the thinking that, okay, it makes sense to use your solution. and then the discovery questions are really key here, right? So, okay, taking a step back, you are not there to just go in and pitch what you have, what your solution does. What you're there to try and do is almost have this hat on where you're a doctor. You're trying to look at that. You're trying to diagnose their symptoms. You don't just walk in there and say, oh, you need this particular solution. You want to get into what the symptoms are. Okay, so you have high, in this specific example, you've got high trade breaks. Okay, that it's really taking time to do the settlements. There's a delay there. Oh my God, the regulatory compliance concerns. We're not getting the reports done on time. Oh, there's a lot of manual intervention. Oh, this is all this stuff around operational costs. And you know what? If we start having higher trade volumes, we can't scale. We can't deal with those effectively. So you want to be getting them to talk about their symptoms and then getting them to think about, well, hang on, in a world where we're helping you to reduce errors and speeding up things like reconciliation, what does that mean for your business? Like, what does that mean from a positive standpoint? You get the idea. And then when you're coming to the closing the meeting, if you did all the stuff that I talked about at the front of the meeting, i.e. setting up the expectation that it's a hard no or it's a commitment to the next step, closing the meeting becomes natural and a lot less awkward, okay? And you're kind of nipping in the bud any of those excuses that typically come up at the end of the meeting, like, oh, I need to check with a colleague or we need to have an internal meeting. So just be really confident, like, based on our conversation, do you believe our platform can help? If they say yes, challenge them. Why do you think that? And this is an important question to ask, is because we believe what we think. So what we can, through our own thought process, we believe that it's much better to get them to arrive through their thought process why you're the right solution rather than you telling them directly. I know that sounds a bit convoluted, but you want to, through your questions, get them to think, arrive through a logical thought process. Right, it makes sense to do business with this particular provider. So if they say, yeah, I think you can help, ask them why, because they're going to tell you, they're almost going to feed back to you everything that you've got them to think about. So like, oh yeah, you're going to help us with reducing errors. We're going to become much more efficient. You're going to reduce cost. And then you ask them, okay, right, so what date can we book in the trial? And again, you're asking for commitment there. So if they're serious, they're going to say, right, yeah, I think, we want to invest time in this. Maybe it will be the start of next month. If you're going to charge for the trial, you're going to obviously get them to sign some kind of agreement. So you'll say something along the lines of, I'll send a trial agreement, and once it's signed, we'll schedule the implementation or the trial date. And then final pushback, give them an opportunity to backpedal if they want. I'd much rather you found out right now that they're not serious than further down the line when you're getting ghosted and wasting all of that energy chasing them up. Did you get my proposal? Did you sign it yet? All of that stuff. It just drains your energy. So check, ask the question. Are you sure you want to move forward? Okay, this is your last chance to say no, to bail, to get out of this. And again, what you're doing is testing their commitment to start moving forward to the next stage of your buying process. I know that's been quite a lot of information to take in, but it's a fundamentally different approach to changing how your meetings go, because I want you to start really investing your time in meetings that go to the next step in your journey, rather than letting the prospect determine the buying journey and wasting your time and, frankly, energy and motivation. So I think I've spoken enough. If you're interested in finding out a bit more about the whole growth springboard process, there's a lot in it. There's a whole 4-pillar process which looks not only at meetings but everything else to do with sales, including building your funnel, cold calling, negotiating, all of that good stuff. Look me up, drop me a message, and I'm happy to ask any questions. But that is it from me. Good luck with it all.